Hi, Michael. First of all, congratulations for being one of the winners of our Karma Fiction short story contest.
Thank you so much. It's quite an honor. It's delightful to have been chosen, and I've worked in the past with Moment, so it's especially exciting to be back with you guys. I'm obviously a big fan of the magazine and the history, and of course, a huge fan of Rebecca Goldstein. I grew up Orthodox, though, so 36 Arguments for the Existence of God was actually a really powerful book for me, especially even the appendix, which had all of the arguments that a lot of religious Jews use to prove God and kind of the counter arguments there.
Speaking of growing up Orthodox, could you tell me a little bit about how you came up with the idea for this story in particular?
It actually started with a memory. When I was growing up, my mother would cover her hair, and I would always see these like shackles placed by the window. And I sort of just wondered about that and wonder what it'd be like to see that and think about someone who's no longer there. And that's where the idea sort of came from. And the idea of I was working on a collection of I was working on an interconnected collection of short stories that all had to do with scandalous memoir being a fictional scandalous memoir being published in the Orthodox community and the reactions everyone had to this. So the rabbi was a character in the reactions, and I wanted to sort of write a story about him. And initially, I have very complicated feelings towards my own Orthodox childhood. Initially, it was going to be a much meaner story. I think like it was going to have like a ha ha salacious ending. And then as I was writing it, I sort of felt more and more compassion for the character and this sort of, I guess, idea that as much as we try in life, religious or not religious, we're bound to fail and sort of hope we can find forgiveness for our failures.
Um, I mean, in particular, I found the main character, this rabbi, you managed to, you know, make him both a sympathetic character who, as I was reading, I had a lot of empathy for, but you also really saw his flaws. And you could see where he was lacking maybe in his marriage. When you were creating him, how intentional were you to get all sides of him?
So it's sort of hard to say, like, while you're, like, I recall working on this story when I was in the middle of the collection and just being surprised by the compassion I sort of felt towards him. And I was going to make him more condemning of the secular world, which he does to some degree condemn it. But I also sort of wanted to write about sort of the humility he discovers late in life. That despite um, how much he believes religion has allowed him to learn about life, he still doesn't have that kind of practical knowledge, doesn't have that knowledge. So it was pretty intentional. I mean, there's one detail that I really like to include, which actually came from I had a rabbi years and years ago who actually did do something that the rabbi does. He bought his wife the same card every year over and over again and didn't notice it. So that was just a fun detail to include, not in a mean way. But I was really surprised just by I guess one of the first times I wrote a story and I was like, oh, I kind of feel bad for this fellow. And it's more about him as a character than the writing itself, I guess, which was new to me. And he's a bit character in a lot of the other short stories of the collection, like the teenager that he mentions about the weird sort of metaphor about at the end is actually the narrator of another story. So he does fit in. And this was the one time I sort of had to give him more of a sense, I get, of who to get a sense of who he is.
Are you still working on that collection?
I was working on it. I thought I had finished it and I mailed it to my agent who was very polite about it and was not so interested. So I put it on hold for a little bit. I'm hoping to work on it with another writer. I'm with another writer who wanted to do a line edit with me, some other published Jewish author I'm a big fan of. I'm still working on it. It's sort of a work in progress, but I think I'm really happy with the success of being like honestly, this success with Moment really means a lot to me because I hadn't really gotten a lot of feedback from the collection like I wanted. And this sort of honor and notification of like, oh, you did something that affected people really meant a lot to me and made me want to see what I can do for the collection instead of feeling like as most writers do, I guess, most unpublished writers, that it's a total failure and everything like that. It made me want to revisit and try to sharpen a little bit of it. But I think it made me realize sort of my own limitations as a writer, especially as a short story writer. Like we all dream about writing. I hate to use like sentences like Alice Munro. I mean, obviously, there's unfortunate news about her recently, but as a writer, I mean, she's still very powerful. Um, so that actually, I mean, sexual abuse is sort of part of the story collection actually as well, and something I used to report on. So that's also briefly mentioned in the story. But sorry, that's a little tangential. So I sort of realized my limitations as a short story writer, and I wanted to go see if I can work on a novel, which is what I'm hopefully going to start soon. But I'm always looking for readers of the collection to see what I can do with it, I guess.
Who are some of the writers, either contemporary or from the past that you look to when you're writing for inspiration?
I mean, I really want to like, if you'll forgive me for name checking again, Rebecca Goldstein. I actually met her years and years ago. I interviewed her when she wrote her book Betraying Spinoza, and it just sort of when I saw that she was going to be when I saw that like she was the judge, it really brought me back to 36 Arguments, just because it's such a work that I sort of reflect on in terms of the journey that the character has. At least the book itself, it's about someone who leaves like a sign of a Hasidic dynasty who leaves the faith and then comes back to it and sort of at the end. And it had a real impact on me that I wasn't aware of. And obviously, like the ending, I mean, the appendix with all the arguments against the existence of God sort of was personally very important to me. But so Rebecca obviously is a writer. I'm reading her new book, well, her most recent book on philosophy. I've been lucky enough to form a friendship with the writer Steve Stern, whom I absolutely adore, and I mean I wish I could write more like him. But there are other obviously I grew up a lot on Jewish writers themselves. It's funny actually. One of the things that really impressed me with my wife when we first started dating was she knew an author, like a Jewish author I hadn't heard about, which kind of surprised me. Mordechai Richler, who's a Canadian author. But if I'm going to say the authors who I learned from, I mean, obviously Philip Roth is sort of in every Jewish writer's like bookcase. Um, Nathan Englander is also a very important figure. If I want to head back to other Jewish writers, I mean, Isaac Babel is sort of the end all be all of Jewish writers. Cynthia Ozick, I was just looking through my closet, through my bookcase, and I saw her The Pagan Rabbi collection, which is just like talk about perfection of a Jewish short story. It's there. Like that's the best short story. You should just give up after reading that. Um, I have a collection of Ivy Parrott stories that I'm always sort of leafing through. These are important writers to me, and I do want to like if I can just mention a writer who I just read that I'm actually really impressed with. Ruvain Fenton just published a book called Goyhood, which I thought was really enjoyable, and he describes the Orthodox world really well, and I kind of felt a little pang of envy, just at how well he did it. Tova Mervis is another writer whose work I follow, Allegra Goodman. I think if you look at the list of former judges from Moment Magazine's Karma Short Fiction, you'll find out all the people who have idolized and been desperate to follow and ape, and have aped. I don't know how successfully, of course.
Well, thank you, Michael, for taking the time to talk to us, and congratulations again.
Thank you so much, Sarah. It's always good talking with you.
Good talking with you.